Guests. Not that I don't enjoy talking to every single one of my guests. I honestly do. But the ones who are truly close friends of mine, like the joy, and I just hope that we can provide that great experience for our listener. No pressure. As we welcome in the Grand Tyler from the Grand Lodge of New York, my friend and brother, Right Worshipful Don Gorham. Welcome to the Craftsmen Online Podcast.
Yeah, good evening. This is an opportunity that I have sought.
And in place of the giant sword that he carries into the Grand Lodge session, for our YouTube live streamers, you're seeing him surrounded by guitars behind him. So I know the question the audience is asking is, brother, before we get into the defense of the three ruffians, what's the story with the guitars behind you?
Not much. I've always been interested. I'm not particularly great at it. However, everyone has a different voice, and so I noodle around and something comes up, and that's kind of like how I meditate.
Nice. Yeah. They're also good starting, icebreakers for when you do these virtual meetings. It immediately draws your eye, and people are like, "Oh wow, what's your favorite song? What guitar do you play?" So, just something to look forward to for YouTube Live. All right, so we're gonna get to the visual aid, the book here that both of us have a copy of, Defense of the Ruffians. And if you've never heard of this play, or like me, you had and have not secured your own copy, don't worry. The link to order this for yourself will be in the notes for this episode from Amazon. Brother Don, we got to just start like where your story began with me. You were one of the brothers who were so kind to come to DC, the nation's capital, when I got my commission to be our Right Worshipful and serve our Grandmaster, Most Worshipful Stephen Adam Rubin. That was really the first time we talked, and we kind of started bonding over the concept of this play, The Defense of the Ruffians. When did you first hear about it?
So, in my travels to my district, the Noble Ninth Manhattan, in Kingstown and Beethoven, there's a brother, Major West, and he introduced me to this, and we had thought about working on it together and doing some kind of traveling thing with it some time ago. And since then, every once in a while, I go back into it, and during the time when we had met, I was back into it again, and so now we're here and trying to go through what this all means.
Yeah, it's crazy how the story evolves, because we met around this time last year here in DC, and then earlier this year in 2025 we connected again at Unity Day, which is a special event hosted by the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, and I believe January, because it was pretty cool. And at dinner that night we started talking about this book again, and you said, "Hey brother, I'm just going to send you a copy of it." And I just took it as like one of those nice things that sometimes a brother or a friend will say. A few days later, this arrives in my mailbox from Amazon. It was the quickest and most exciting read that I've ever done. And then I couldn't wait to call and talk with you about it, because I had heard of this story as a one-act play, which it is, that was written way after our ritual that we know of the legend of Hiram Abiff and the Hiramic legend. And what's fascinating about this is this play revolves around one person, and there's two characters. Can you tell our listener a little bit about that?
Sure. Basically, this is a story about Jubalum. He's awaiting execution after his brothers Jubala and Jubalo have already been. And Conscience brings himself into play and starts asking him some questions. You talked about when this was made. This was from 1977 by an author, Thomas P. Davis. And although this isn't canon, it's really an interesting look into the background of especially Jubalum. We always look at as Hiram Abiff as the exemplar, and we know a little bit about him being an architect, and we hear about him in the second degree, and now back in the third. But why did these brothers, want the word or think they deserve the word? And what was their motivation? We really have nothing. So this is a really, really whether it's not canon, but it's a really interesting way to look deeper into the building of the temple and our third degree ritual. Why these three brothers did what they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you talk, just a reminder, while this episode is fully intended for Masons on all levels, it's also for those that just have an interest in Freemasonry. So as you've gone out and gotten whatever version of the Masonic ritual, most people are aware of the Haramic legend, and as Brother Don points out, this is not actually part of any standard work or lecture or ritual or code or anything in Masonry. It's clearly out in publication, so it's something that you can easily and openly talk about with anyone, because no secrets are really revealed in here. However, as you really do point out, the true secrets are, as we go through the degree and then study it afterwards as Master Masons, we have our own impression or maybe our own idea of what motivated the Ruffians to do what they did to try to obtain the secret word from Grandmaster Hiram Abiff. But this book gives a little bit more of that detail. How did you find the eeriness of the conversation between Jubalum and himself with his own conscience, that inner dialogue that starts to build up?
I don't know that I found it eerie, because I'm having that conversation on a daily basis myself. It's actually really familiar.
Okay.
And you know what? That's the point. When I had said about Hiram Abiff being an exemplar, I think just as much, let's say prior to Masonry, and even still, because we're still working on ourselves on our spiritual temples. So, I find a lot of commonality with Jubalum and him as an exemplar, as of a person who I don't want to be.
What do you mean by that?
All right, so Jubalum, if you look at the Hiramic drama, and one of the things I was grateful for in recent years was the reintroduction of the soliloquy after the slaying of our grand architect. So, and if you take it alone in our third degree ritual in the drama, it would seem like he goes from murderous design to remorse, and you can read it as such. At first he's got this dramatic sarcasm about these pomp and pageantry, and the stately columns are blessed from the heavens and such, and then all of a sudden he has this realization where he sees that Grandmaster Hiram Abiff has held on to his value in the face of the loss of his mortality. So, and I'll circle back to that too, because I have some thoughts on that. So if I take and entertain this play, then I get a little deeper look, and I see it more as him being the revelation of the value, well, I'm trying to stay away from a word, a very valued word to us, but when I circle back and I take a look, I'm at a little bit of a loss for a placement on this. I just need a cue for what we were talking about.
Well, I can jump in and help you out, because I know where you're going with this. So when you first go through the Hiramic legend, I think a lot of brothers just take that as like, oh, this is canon. Like, this is what happened in Freemasonry. This is the story here. It's like, it's not. It's an allegory. And then as you begin to study it more, you realize it's like an allegory within an allegory.
Yeah. So Jubalum, rather than just being automatically remorseful, I think he's more just in a place of mutual respect for another person who's holding on to his values, because Jubalum is sticking by his guns on this too. And so I think it's just a matter of respect. And later on, throughout this play, you kind of hear him dancing around it. Conscience and he himself he's contradicting himself, where his ego won't allow him to reveal to himself that he's not in the right. And the right is to Jubalum, even the word the right is not even a clear.
Oh, dude, that was the part for me. It was so interesting when I talked about it being eerie, because as you're saying, the way when this story falls, just imagine, if you've been through the Master Mason's degree, you've been through the Hiramic legend, you've been through the drama. This is the part that happens after they get captured and convicted for killing Grandmaster Hiram Abiff, which in our ritual happens in like 5 seconds. And this kind of fills in that blank, because his other two brothers, Jubalo and Jubala, have already been executed. So he's sitting there kind of going through those final steps, and the only person he's having a conversation with is the voice in his own head, that as the audience member, you're hearing all of this. And he's kind of walking through all of the stages of mourning or passing. He's going through all of those stages of death and like separation, but he's also as you're getting to, he's justifying why he did what he did. And unlike most criminals, like at the end when they're getting ready to face their execution, they're like, okay, I did it, I'm sorry, I'm remorseful, spare me. As you point out, like, this guy is challenging all of this all the way up until his final breath.
Yeah. And even with this is Jubilant. In the beginning of the story, Conscience enters Jubilo, and he's like, they're already, how odd it is that they are dead and I am not. And so in a lot of the portrayals of the drama, and by no means am I saying that anybody's doing it wrong. I just have you'll see Jubilo, and Jubilum all kind of coming in like the brute and with a lot of strength. And in Masonry, and we have a lot of allegory, our symbols mean multiple things. And I treat Jubilo, and Jubilum like first, second degree, wisdom, strength, beauty. And, the younger child, the middle child, and the adult, and the older child. And so keeping with the beauty, wisdom, beauty, strength, and wisdom, I see like Jubilo coming in, and he doesn't come in so strong. He thinks what he has to say will be enough to get the word. And you have Jubilo, who's more of a middle child who needs to prove to both of these guys, so he's going to come in more brutish. And I kind of look at Jubilum coming in with not only this strong physical authority, but he's been around a while, and he has something to say, and he's going to be forceful, but it's more coming out of the command of himself.
Yeah. It's interesting that you've picked up on that. And what I also find fascinating is the role, as we welcome on Right Worshipful Brother Don Gorham, who's the Grand Tyler for the Grand Lodge of New York. And for those YouTube live streamers, you can kind of get a sense he's a pretty big dude, probably like a linebacker, if not a defensive end or tight end in college playing football. But the size of the sword that you carry, for our listener, if you could just think of the smallest Mason or person that's about the size of the sword that he gets to carry into the Grand Lodge session to kind of get the party started. And it's interesting because we always associate the sword as like a symbol of justice, right? And here you are walking in with this. So it's very interesting to get your perspective on this prisoner now who's sitting here kind of mulling over his own conscience, like kind of recreating his memories of the murder of Hiram Abiff, while he's also kind of putting together the reality of like being punished for death. And it was interesting. One of the motivations of why he did it was to get a word that he had not yet earned the right to receive. And he kind of challenges that idea at a certain point where he's like, why was this being kept from me? I should have gotten this.
When I talk about the identification, as a young man, trying to find career in any job, how often was I, Jubilum, like, toiling at work, not feeling recognized, or worse yet, seeing someone else who didn't think they work as hard and gets the recognition, or maybe just stuck in a rut, pointing a finger, excuses elsewhere. And that's where I find identification with him. So in the play, he even says that he and his brothers know how to build a temple. But then he kind of like he says something about how, but maybe we didn't know what greatness was. Maybe we didn't know what righteousness was. So, but that's where I talked about ego before, where his ego won't let him like see that, that's actually me and not the guy that thinks he knows everything. And so he wants the word because, they've been toiling in the pits with the stone, and, all he hears is that, when the temple's completed, I'll get my money and, or, get the word actually. And they don't get it. But they feel that they deserve it. And the thing is the word isn't just proof of you. I think the word was an allowance, like a work visa when you travel, to prove that you have the skills. The reason why we had those guilds of tradesmen were to protect ourselves and not to have other workers say that they're master masons and then producing shoddy work, because that would lessen our ability to collect on that.
Right.
So So, but Jubileum here thinks that he's worthy, and I'm sure. And this is the thing too. Like, I think him as the artificer. Not that he had to convince too hard Jubileum. I mean Jubilo, that they deserve the word. They were working and toiling along together. So, but they didn't really get what it meant. The mastership of it, the earning of it.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
You touched on a couple key points when it comes to the brothers listening that are getting ready for the third degree. I know in some jurisdictions, they don't get the chance to wear the costumes like we do in the Grand Lodge of New York. In other jurisdictions, they don't have the narrator part to kind of really frame the story and kind of fill the audience and brothers in as to what's going on. But it doesn't matter really what jurisdiction you're in, because I've seen some brothers make the same mistake when they're cast into the roles of first, second, or third base, as we like to say.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes, they take the role of the Ruffians as being ROUGH instead of RUFFIAN, and they try to.
I hadn't seen that.
Yeah,
that's an amazing way to look at that. I didn't think of that. Yeah,
you were kind of touching on that. Like, there's people that rough you up, right? And it's tough to say, like, being in the city, I'm sure you've seen someone who's been roughed up or bumped up against a wall. And we've all seen this in movies or in the media, but then there's being an actual ruffian. And you were kind of describing that as some of the ignorance that kind of comes as like a younger person. Do you understand now? And do you have like a new appreciation for if somebody was to say, hey, stop acting like a ruffian? Does that have a new meaning to you now?
Sure it does. And it's an importance too. Like, when we hear a word and we think of it in context, but we don't really take a deeper look into it. And we've been a Mason for 14 years now, and I've gone and I practice ritual, and in degree work, and I actually like to use certain parts of our ritual in conversation to bring a word in to tie it all together and implement it in my life. But there's a lot of stuff that I haven't, and I used to urge when I was in AGL, like, you hear one charge at a degree, and I would always urge them to read that one and the other one that's there that you didn't hear. Those are all those building blocks of us becoming, you're a master mason, but you're still an entered apprentice at fellow craft. It's all those steps are there for us. And so, to take a deeper look, I've been diving in more and more into this play, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I should be also now diving back into my ritual, my standard work and lectures to get a different understanding. When I first came in, when you first hear it, this is all new stuff, and and I'm not the same person I was 14 years ago because of what Masonry's done for me. So I need to take another look at that to see. To balance it out with this new being that I am in my growth, right? So,
Defense of the Ruffians is the book. It's a dialogue with conscience by Thomas B. Davis. As we mentioned earlier on, you can find the notes for this episode, the link to purchase this on Amazon, as it's widely available. It's been out in circulation for a while. Right Worshipful Brother Don Gorham is our guest on the Craftsmen Online podcast. The cool thing I like about this book, besides that, I didn't pay for mine, you were kind enough to send it to me, is that it's only 15 pages long. And a page turner it is, because as we keep kind of drilling is that this kind of gives us one brother's interpretation of what could possibly have been the motivation or the mindset of Jubileum as they were going through to obtain the thing that they weren't worthy to receive. And there's so many parts of this that anyone has borrowed a book from me that I highlight things because I'm like, oh, this is a great resource to have a discussion in the lodge with, or just with other brothers. And Don, you and I have shared many late night conversations and just phone conversations about parts of this book. If there was one takeaway that you have, what's the one thing that you would want to share with someone who's not very familiar with it that could learn something just from this podcast episode today?
It goes back to introspection. This is an opportunity to take a really hard look at our actions. Here's and from our life before and during Masonry. One of the things about why Jubileum was so hard on getting this word. He came from working in an orchard, and his father, they pruned trees to take care of them so they would flourish. during the building of King Solomon's temple, taxes were raised to, so that they could fund that big project. And, people weren't buying trees, or they had the money to even feed themselves, and so their work wasn't there. So they were put into the quarries.
Mm.
And then Conscience is asking this question about, so what's the difference? And so he's talking about, the heat of the sun, the stones, not looking at the stones, but the stones staring back at him. Some wonderful words in this, and to make a visions of how it was like for them. But and I don't even want to recite any of the poetry of his description of working in the orchard.
Yeah.
When he talks about, the shade, sun, shade, these two opposing things, and how the breeze does this. And, I would prefer that a reader would go in and try to just suss that out themselves. So it's really kind of sweet when you think about it. But now he goes from, and maybe it's a glorified look at his past too. Things were always seem rosier, and it's was he really happy at work? But he was certainly happier there than he was in the quarries.
Mm.
So in the quarries now, it's the beating sun, the harsh stone, the dust. Yeah.
And when you think about it, esoterically, it's he preferred the lighter labor than to the heavier labor, the work that was being done without the sound of tool and without the this and the that we know from our ritual. It was hard work putting together King Solomon's temple. You could see why these guys who were literally busting their butts would be like, hey, I feel like I've earned what I've been promised I was going to be given. And you're like, no, not yet. You haven't completed the work yet. Come when this is finished. And why that would provoke them to come to this, which that was the part that I found interesting just going through it, is that it's not necessarily a conversation between his consciousness and the prisoner, so to speak. It's really familiar with kind of our catechism, where the conscious part of his brain is asking a question, which as the reader, you're already like, hey, I've been through this. If for those that have gone through it, and you're like, I already know what his answer should be. And then he gives a different answer or an alternate answer. And you're like, well, I never really considered that from the mindset of somebody that would think this or do that. And I kind of thought about it of times when I have screwed up in life and maybe wasn't in the right, place of mind, and was later going through and doing the autopsy on what the mistake I had done, and trying to rectify things, and almost in a way lecturing yourself, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, certainly.
So I want to get to the part of this that's really cool. We've talked about how this book, yes, it's a book, but it was really written to be a one-act play. And this is the part where you and I were talking about this. And I was like, dude, we should do this. We should have a traveling cast. It's really just going to be two people, maybe a lights guy, some sound here or there, and just go visit lodges and put this play on. What are you kind of envisioning this to evolve into, whether it's a traveling program or maybe a short film?
It's a hard task. I mean, look at I think it's easier for me to memorize a body of work, just that I would just do it out myself. This is a back and forth with a lot of stuff, and that would take some time, and to really flush it out, you would be growing as you were doing it, like somebody in a play. I think it might be best served if we could do something in a video format where we could tweak it and actually make it as strong as possible with the message, and then it would be what it is.
Yeah, I was thinking we have so many beautiful lodge rooms in the Grand Lodge of New York, and maybe having a quote unquote live studio audience with the right kind of lighting. And I know we have very artistic and talented brothers that do film and stage productions, and being able to produce something like this that we could share throughout all of the lodges in New York as a virtual program, and then to brothers elsewhere. But for those that can't pull that together or couldn't even place it and how to do it, that shouldn't prevent you from getting a copy of this and just sharing it with your brothers as a presentation or a lodge discussion. If someone was to do that, what advice would you have for them, and what would you like to see them focus on?
Well, in the beginning of the book, it kind of has the desire that the author would like to have, pretty much in the center of a lodge. It's dark, and And they keep conscience away, always away. And I kind of imagine conscience coming in here, coming from below here, fading in, fading out in front of him. It's there's James Taylor on the Walking Men album, Ain't No Song. There's a phrase that says, painters use their eyes to show us what they see, but when that canvas dries, we all see it differently. So, the author had his way, but maybe we could find it. And yeah, he also says that he's in there with a staff. But he's in a, I don't, and later on it says he doesn't have any weapon to defend or whatever. But so I would take away that, and I should probably just keep him with chains as something that he could use to represent not only the chains that he presently has, but the chains that he probably felt in the quarries.
Yeah, no, that's good, because I often think of the esoterical explanation of the punishments that we have when we violate the obligations, the penalties, right? And that, in many jurisdictions, we say we symbolically will do this. But we're not giving any secrets away. We've discussed the ruffians and some of the deeper meanings of these penalties in previous podcast episodes. But when you violate yourself and you misspeak or you misact in front of those you care about, you do feel like you've stabbed yourself in the chest, or, torn out your own tongue, or you feel so sick to your stomach because you betrayed somebody. And those memories, those reminders are supposed to, stay in that memory to prevent you, that caution before you get there. The other thing I was thinking about when you talked about the role of like the conscience, the movie Joan of Arc that came out probably 20 years ago now, Dustin Hoffman's character, when he plays the conscious as she's sitting in the cell, him, moving around and seeing his face, like that immediately.
Oh, that was Mila Jovovich, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be, we got to sit here and talk about this with our screenplay writer, our director, our producer. Defense of the Ruffians comes out. So I feel like I've asked you so many questions. Anything that you were hoping to get from me tonight?
Well, in your experience with the ritual, how when you're watching the interplay between Jubilo and Jubilum with Hiram Abiff, how does that make you feel?
It's interesting because every time, no matter what degree it is, like this is my 10th year in masonry, so I'm always still picking up like little seeds of new ideas, like stuff I didn't catch the first time, no matter how many times I've read it or seen it. But specifically through the interplay. So here's what's interesting is that every time I go witness a degree, there's always that moment where I'm like, well, I've never seen that before in a Masonic degree. And it's usually an action that's done by the candidate because, well, they don't have a speaking part and they don't really know what to do. So it's always interesting to see their reactions when they're confronted by the ruffians. And without giving too much away of how the degrees are performed, it's very clear that we can see some of their facial expressions when the candidate is going through it. And I've seen guys who kind of are shocked, like they feel like they're getting mugged, in a back alley somewhere. I feel some guys that kind of have that, fight or flight thing that's starting to pump through them. Like,
I've seen that.
I get concerned about that. But then I've also seen guys where they have like this almost like Joker from the Batman cool, calm, and collectness, where they're like, what do you think? You're scaring me? And they're just like, and I'm always like, what is this brother thinking about when he's going through this? But to kind of echo the point that you're making is that I would personally like to see kind of a progressive stair step of intimidation, for lack of a better term, when it comes to the interactions between the first ruffian and Hiram Abiff, the second to the third. Because when you really get into the grist of what the ritual is about, they didn't really intend to kill this guy. That wasn't their plan to murder him. They honestly thought that they could just convince him through different tactics for him to give up this password that they wanted so that they could leave job early and get paid, right? So it really wasn't until Jubilum at the end, and that's what I find so interesting when you talk about the physical description of him as being the bigger brother of the three, and my Sonic brother, honestly. And how he's the one that gets quote unquote rough. He's the one in that moment that decides I have to kill this guy, because if he gets past me, he's going to get to a safe place, and then the three of us are going to be in really big trouble.
Yeah.
And even then, as you really kind of go through the forensic analysis of the crime scene, so to speak, you realize that these guys, number one, really weren't very good craftsmen. They were bad fellow crafts. They're even worse murderers and schemers. They kind of had a plan on how they wanted to escape, but that even got foiled. And at the end of the day, as bad as they were for doing what they did, they eventually admitted to doing it, and justice was served. So that was the part that I found really interesting coming back to this book, was the take that Jubilum's consciousness has with him and preparing him to like receive this punishment. And Jubilum, in like my opinion, almost still kind of being defiant all the way up until the very end, where it's going to happen. And he didn't really regret it, which kind of also educates us to the fact that some people go through life as a ruffian and they never learn from their mistakes.
You know, I think there's a big reason why Jubilum has the inability to correct himself, because we all do. We start everything with deity. I believe Jubilum to be a godless man. He references Moses in here, and he'll talk about God, but he only and he says something else which is really pure, that if Adam had done to what Adam had done, if he had done it in front of Solomon, would have been a crime, not a sin.
Yep.
So he's a grand justifier. Jubilum is, but I believe it's a lot of it has to do because it's all about him. That he is the center of his own universe.
Yeah.
And conscience even asks him, "What about you and the workmen?" You know, especially master masons, you know, they were the ones sitting in the shade, you know, and he had a disdain. He gained a modicum of respect for Hiram Abiff, but he thought him a pompous man. You know, he couldn't understand the weight of the authority. He didn't have the patience to get what he thought he deserved, and his inability to resolve himself is because I don't think he believed that there was anything that he needed to do to get to the stately heavens. And so
the other part of it that I find so interesting is, so they do say it's a conversation between, you know, the conscience and the prisoner, right? But it almost sounds like, and I've never been in jail or prison, but it almost sounds at first that it's another prisoner that's calling out from somewhere in the cells, because the questions that his conscience is asking him, as someone that goes like through the line of like moral decisions and good versus all those ethical dilemmas that you have, the conscience is really phrasing it like, well, did you do this? Did you realize you were wrong for doing it this way? Did you? And a person who believes themselves to be innocent wouldn't question their motives or their actions. They would have just so it does make me wonder that he probably had some remorse towards the end, but yet his rationale, he really believed that what he was doing was right, but that the murder was wrong, that was the bad part, obviously. And it seems like he has a tough issue with everything that motivated him, from him feeling like, as you would say today, and today's talk would be unfair working conditions. Of wages, like all of the things that kind of crush down on us as modern men. And that's why I find some of these like ancient mysteries to be so relevant to us. It's like, but there's what society has determined to be good and bad, but there's also what we inside of our own moral code have defined to be good and bad. And when you step outside of that, like, that's when justice and punishment have to come in and rectify things.
Well, that you had we talked about justice too, and in researching this a little bit further and looking at words, I was kind of struggling to find justice. But until I took these two types of justice, which are distributive justice, which was what Jubilum was looking for in his opportunity and his reward, right? Equal pay and all that kind of thing. And then there's retributive justice, which is the punishment for the wrongdoing. So he's seeking distributive justice, and because of what he did, he's receiving retributive justice. And I think and I love the way it just so happens that those two words kind of like ring out together.
Oh yeah.
And the dichotomy really rings true in this play.
Yeah, and it's definitely a cautionary tale for those of us, watching or reading this. It's just that just because you do the work doesn't guarantee you to get the benefit from it. But sometimes the benefit of the work is something that is unseen to you. And you may not actually receive the benefit ever or many years down the road. You just have to do the work. And this is kind of, to me, when I had the explanation, a brother once said to me, "Stop being such a ruffian." And I looked at him and I'm like, "I'm not being a ruffian. What are you talking?" Like, that's insulting. Like, what are you talking? And then I realized, I'm like, oh, I'm trying to obtain something that I'm not really worthy of receiving yet. I need to put more time into doing this thing so that there's no need for a justification to get it. It's present to everybody that you've earned this, that you can display the proficiency and be able to do it. And I think that's what makes and when you asked about the characters of the Ruffians, I think that's what makes it so beautiful at the quote unquote end of your Masonic degree story, is to come across these three characters, because I can guarantee you, as a Master Mason, you're going to meet people who want to be a part of the fraternity. And we talk about guarding the West Gate all the time.
Absolutely.
But you're going to meet guys that get in and all they want to do is just get that Master Mason's degree so that they can get the ring that they want, wear the apron, just have the title, whatever the case may be. And there's nothing wrong that that's their motivation for that. But you understand that being a Master Mason means so more than just those quote unquote material things. And I think that's what part of the character and the story, the allegory of the Ruffians, is really supposed to remind us.
Yeah, most definitely. I said before about him looking at the Master Masons and Hiram Abiff, and what about me? I'm doing all the work. He doesn't see or understand that those Master Masons were going through they've already been through what he's been doing.
Right.
They've trod that path, as many of our brothers have before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the just because you're not like ripping chisels and stone, that the grand Hiram Abiff, his labor is to 80,000 fellow craft were employed. Man, he had a lot to do, So. Again, he was just so self-centered. He only saw this. He didn't see the grand temple, which was everybody there working in it. Yeah.
I know that we could talk about this all night, because at times we have. But I got to tell you, it has been just such a reward to be able to talk to you as a brother, but also to have one of our Grand Lodge officers to kind of chop up Masonic ritual here on the Craftsmen Online podcast. It just means so much. So thank you so much, Brother Don, Right Worshipful, for taking some time out tonight and being a part of our show.
And you, my Right Worshipful brother, I really have enjoyed this and appreciate the opportunity to bring this out a little bit, because it's just something to inspire a deeper look within our ritual and ourselves, which we are asked to do from the beginning anyway. And so and again, this non ritual has actually having me look deeper into what I've looked in a different way before. Yeah.